The numbers coming out of Oregon this summer read less like a fire season and more like the description of a state under siege. More than 1.6 million acres of forest, rangeland, and wildland have burned. 85 active fires are on the landscape at once, scattered from the dry high desert of the east to the timbered slopes of the Cascades and the rugged canyons of the south. And hanging over all of it is a designation that carries a specific and sobering meaning, the highest of its kind. Oregon is at Preparedness Level 5, the top rung of the national scale, the point at which the firefighting system has run out of slack. This is not an ordinary bad year. It is one of those seasons that redraws the map of what people thought was possible, that stretches every resource to its breaking point, and that forces an entire region to reckon with fire on a scale that feels less like a natural event and more like a transformation of the world itself. To understand what these numbers mean, you have to understand that a wildfire season is not a single story, but 1,000 stories unfolding at once. Each fire its own emergency, its own drama of wind and flame and human effort, its own threat to the towns and forests in its path. 1.6 million acres is a figure so large it resists comprehension, an area that would swallow entire counties, a swath of land the size of a small country, reduced to smoke and ash across a single burning summer. 85 fires burning at once means 85 separate fronts in a war against the flames. 85 places where crews are digging line and aircraft are dropping retardant, and families are watching the ridgelines and waiting for the knock that tells them it is time to go. In this video, we are going to make sense of this extraordinary season, to move beyond the raw numbers and understand what they actually mean for Oregon, for the people who live there, and for anyone who wants to understand the growing power of wildfire in a changing world. Stay with us, because the story of Oregon's fires this summer is a story about the new scale of a very old force. Hashtag, what Preparedness Level 5 really means before we go any further. We need to understand the significance of that phrase, Preparedness Level 5, because it is the key that unlocks the true meaning of this season. It is easy to hear it as just another piece of official language, a bureaucratic label attached to a bad situation. But it is far more than that. It is the top rung of a ladder, the highest setting on a national scale that measures how stretched the country's wildland firefighting resources have become. And reaching it signals that the situation has moved from serious to genuinely critical. The system works like this. The nation's wildland fire response is coordinated at a national level, and the demand on that system is tracked using a scale of preparedness levels that run from 1 at the bottom to 5 at the top. At the lower levels, fire activity is limited, resources are plentiful, and the system has ample capacity to respond to whatever emerges. As fire activity increases across the country, as more large fires ignite and more crews and aircraft and equipment are committed to fighting them, the preparedness level climbs. Each step up the ladder reflects a tightening of the available resources, a growing competition for the finite pool of firefighters and engines and aircraft that the nation can bring to bear. And at the very top, at level 5, the system has reached the point where the demand is so high and the commitment of resources so complete that there is little left in reserve. To reach Preparedness Level 5 means that a very large area of the country is experiencing intense fire activity all at once, that firefighting resources are being mobilized at their maximum extent, and that the competition for those resources has become severe. It means that when a new fire starts, the crews and equipment that would normally rush to contain it may not be available, because they are already committed elsewhere. It means that the managers who allocate resources are forced to make hard choices about priorities, deciding which fires get the crews and the aircraft and which must wait, because there is simply not enough to go around. It is a state of maximum strain, the firefighting equivalent of a hospital declaring that it has run out of beds. A signal that the system is operating at the absolute edge of its capacity. For Oregon to be at the center of a Preparedness Level 5 situation is therefore an indication of just how extreme this season has become. It tells us that the fires burning across the state are not isolated events that can be handled with the ordinary flow of resources, but part of a national emergency that has consumed the available capacity. It tells us that the crews on the ground are stretched thin, that the reserves are depleted, and that the margin for error has narrowed to almost nothing. And it carries an implicit warning, because a system at maximum strain is a system with no cushion, one in which a sudden change in the weather or a new outbreak of fires could tip an already critical situation into catastrophe. Preparedness Level 5 is not just a description of the present, it is a flashing red light about the danger of what might come next. Hashtag, the meaning of 1.6 million acres now. Let us turn to that staggering figure, more than 1.6 million acres burned, and try to grasp what it actually represents, because a number that large can wash over us without registering its scale. An acre is already a substantial piece of ground, and 1 million of them is an area so vast the mind struggles to hold it. 1.6 million acres is a landscape, a region, a portion of an entire state transformed by fire. It is forests that took a century or more to grow, reduced to blackened snags and ash. It is rangeland and high desert scrubland scorched across horizons. It is watersheds, wildlife habitat, ranches, homes, and the accumulated life of the land, all touched by flame across a summer of burning. Drawn as a single block, it would stretch across county after county, dwarfing entire metropolitan areas, extending beyond the limits of vision in every direction. And yet, the acreage figure, for all its enormity, does not tell the whole story, because not all of those acres burn in the same way. Some will have experienced a relatively low-intensity fire, the flames moving through the underbrush and clearing accumulated fuel in a way that, over the long run, can be part of the natural and even healthy cycle of fire-adapted ecosystems. Other acres will have been consumed by high-intensity fire, the kind that kills everything in its path, that burns so hot it sterilizes the soil and destroys the seed banks and leaves behind a moonscape that will take decades or longer to recover. The single number contains within it a whole spectrum of outcomes, from the survivable to the catastrophic, and understanding the season means understanding that variety. But whatever the mix of intensities, the sheer magnitude of 1.6 million acres speaks to a season of extraordinary fire activity, a summer in which the conditions aligned to allow fire to spread on a scale that is far from ordinary. It represents an immense amount of energy released, an immense amount of smoke poured into the atmosphere, an immense amount of habitat altered and human effort demanded. When a state passes 1.6 million acres burned, with the season potentially not even over, it is experiencing fire on a scale that demands to be taken seriously, both for what it means in the moment and for what it suggests about the years to come. Hashtag 85 fires at once. If the acreage tells us the scale of what has burned, the number of active fires tells us the nature of the emergency as it unfolds in real time, and 85 fires burning at once is a picture of an emergency spread across the entire breadth of a state. There is a profound difference between one enormous fire and dozens of separate ones, and that difference shapes everything about how the crisis is experienced and how it must be fought. A single large fire, for all its destructive power, presents a single front, a single incident to which resources can be concentrated and against which a unified strategy can be waged. But 85 fires scattered across the state present 85 separate problems, each demanding its own assessment, its own crews, its own equipment, its own plan. They are spread across different terrain, threatening different communities, driven by different local winds. Some may be small and quickly contained, while others grow into monsters that consume hundreds of thousands of acres. Managing all of them at once requires a vast coordination effort, a constant triage of where to send the limited resources, a perpetual weighing of which fire poses the greatest threat. This dispersion of the fires across the landscape is one of the defining features of a severe season, and it is one of the main reasons the system reaches the point of maximum strain. When fires break out across a wide area all at once, often ignited by the same widespread conditions, a lightning storm passing over a tinder dry landscape, or a spell of hot windy weather that turns small ignitions into large fires, the demand for resources multiplies far beyond what any normal deployment can meet. Each fire wants crews, engines, aircraft, and support, and there are only so many to go around. The result is that the resources must be spread thin, prioritized, and rationed and some fires inevitably receive less than they need, allowing them to grow larger than they might have if the full force of the firefighting system could have been brought against them early. The geography of Oregon makes this challenge especially acute because the state contains such a wide range of landscapes, each with its own fire behavior. The dry forests and rangelands of the eastern side, the dense timber of the Cascade Range, the rugged and remote canyons of the south, all can burn, and all can burn at once. Fires in the remote backcountry may be difficult to reach and dangerous to fight, while fires near populated areas demand immediate attention to protect lives and homes. The crews and their commanders must constantly balance these competing demands, responding to the fires that flare up while trying to hold the lines on the ones already burning. 85 fires at once is not just a large number. It is an emergency that is spread to fill an entire state. Hashtag, the perfect conditions for a firestorm fires of this magnitude do not arise from nowhere. They are the product of conditions, a convergence of factors that together transform a landscape from something that merely could burn into something primed to burn explosively. The fires are the visible event, but beneath them lies a foundation laid over months and years, a set of circumstances that turn the state into a tinderbox waiting for ignition. The first and most fundamental of these conditions is dryness, the accumulated deficit of moisture that leaves the vegetation parched and ready to burn. When a region experiences drought, when the rains fail and the snowpack melts early and the soil and plants lose their moisture, the entire landscape becomes more flammable. The living plants dry out, the dead vegetation becomes tinder, and the great mass of fuel that covers the land shifts from a state that resists fire to a state that eagerly carries it. A dry landscape is a landscape ready to burn, and when the dryness is severe and widespread, the readiness extends across the whole region so that a spark anywhere can grow into a fire. And a fire anywhere can spread with terrible speed. Layered on top of the dryness is heat, the extreme temperatures that intensify everything about the fire danger. Heat pulls even more moisture from the vegetation, driving the fuels to a state of extreme flammability. It stresses the forests, weakening the trees, and on the days when the temperatures soar, the heat creates the atmospheric conditions in which fires burn most fiercely, the hot, unstable air that allows flames to grow and generate their own weather. A heat wave passing over a drought-stricken landscape is a recipe for explosive fire behavior, and the extreme heat that has become an increasing feature of recent summers has repeatedly provided exactly the conditions in which fires can grow beyond control. Then there is wind, perhaps the single most important factor in turning a fire from a manageable event into a catastrophe. Wind is the great accelerant of wildfire, the force that drives the flames across the landscape, that carries embers ahead of the fire to start new blazes, that pushes a fire faster than crews can respond, and turns a contained situation into a rout. A fire burning in calm conditions can often be fought and held, but the same fire under strong winds can explode in size, racing across miles of terrain in hours, jumping fire lines and roads and rivers. The worst fire disasters are almost always driven by wind, and the wind events of fire season are the moments when the fires make their greatest and most dangerous runs. And underlying all of these immediate conditions is the accumulated fuel itself, the sheer quantity of burnable material that has built up across the landscape over time, creating dense accumulations that can support intense and fast-moving fire. When abundant fuel meets deep drought, extreme heat, and driving wind across a wide region, the stage is set for fire on the scale of 1.6 million acres. Hashtag, when the system runs out, we have spoken of Preparedness Level 5 as a marker of maximum strain, but it is worth dwelling on what that strain actually looks like on the ground. The wildland firefighting system is built around a finite pool of resources: the crews of firefighters, the engines, the bulldozers, the aircraft that drop water and retardant, the specialized teams that manage complex incidents, and the vast logistical apparatus that supports them all. In an ordinary season, this pool is sufficient to respond to the fires that emerge. But in a severe season, when fires break out across a wide area all at once, the demand can far exceed the supply. And the system is forced into a mode of triage and rationing that fundamentally changes the nature of the response. When resources are scarce, the managers who direct the firefighting effort must prioritize, and their priorities are shaped above, all by the protection of human life, and, after that, of homes and critical infrastructure. Fires that threaten communities receive the crews and the aircraft, while fires burning in remote areas, however large, may receive little direct attention, left to burn while the limited resources are directed where the stakes for human life are highest. This is a rational and necessary approach, but it has consequences. Because a fire that is not aggressively fought in its early stages can grow into a monster. The scarcity of resources, in other words, can itself contribute to the scale of the burning. The strain also falls heavily on the firefighters themselves, who in a severe season are pushed to the limits of human endurance. Wildland firefighting is brutally hard and dangerous work in the best of circumstances, and in a season of maximum strain, the crews may work extended assignments with little rest, moving from fire to fire, laboring in extreme heat and choking smoke for days and weeks on end. Fatigue accumulates, and with it the risk of injury and error. And the managers must balance the need to keep crews on the line against the imperative of protecting their safety. The human beings who fight these fires are a finite and precious resource, and in a season like this one, they are asked to give everything they have. Finally, the exhaustion of the system creates a dangerous vulnerability, because a firefighting apparatus committed to its absolute limit has no reserve to meet a new emergency. If, in the midst of a Preparedness Level 5 situation, a new fire erupts near a populated area, or a shift in the weather causes several existing fires to blow up at once, there may be no additional resources to send. Because everything is already deployed. This is the deepest danger of a system at maximum strain, the absence of any cushion against the unexpected. When the system runs out, the margin of safety that normally protects communities from the worst outcomes disappears, and everyone, the firefighters and the residents alike, is left more exposed to whatever the fire season brings next. Hashtag, the smoke that crosses a continent, the flames themselves, for all their drama, are only part of the danger a fire season of this magnitude presents, because fires of this scale produce something that travels far beyond the burning forests and affects millions who may never see a flame, and that is smoke. The smoke pouring into the atmosphere from more than 1.5 million acres of burning land becomes a hazard in its own right, one that can spread across states and even across the continent, degrading air quality and threatening health on a scale that rivals the direct impact of the fires. Wildfire smoke is a complex and dangerous mixture, filled with tiny particles and harmful gases produced by the combustion of vegetation. The most concerning component is the fine particulate matter, the minuscule particles small enough to be inhaled deep into the lungs and even to pass into the bloodstream. These particles are the primary reason wildfire smoke is so harmful, because once inhaled, they can trigger a range of adverse effects, from irritation of the eyes and airways to more serious consequences for the heart and lungs. When the smoke from a major fire season settles over a region, the concentration of these particles can climb to levels considered genuinely hazardous, turning the simple act of breathing into a health risk. What makes the smoke from a season like this so far-reaching is the sheer quantity produced and the way it is carried by the winds high in the atmosphere. The smoke from large fires can be lofted to great heights and transported by the prevailing winds across enormous distances, spreading far beyond the state where the fires burn. Communities hundreds or even thousands of miles away can find their skies hazed and their air quality degraded by smoke that originated in Oregon's forests. The smoke does not respect borders, and a severe fire season in one state can become an air quality emergency across a wide swath of the continent, affecting people who have no direct connection to the fires, but who breathe the same air. The health effects fall hardest on the most vulnerable, on those with existing respiratory or heart conditions, on the elderly, on the very young. For these people, a heavy smoke event can be genuinely dangerous, aggravating their conditions and, in the worst cases, contributing to serious health crises. But even the healthy are affected. Advised to stay indoors and limit their activity during the worst of the smoke. Schools may close, events may be canceled, and daily life may grind to a halt across entire regions. And in a severe season, the smoke does not come and go in a single event, but returns again and again, settling over regions for days and weeks as the fires continue to burn. A sustained assault on health that accumulates over time. The smoke that crosses a continent is one of the most far-reaching legacies of a fire season like this one, a reminder that when a state burns on this scale, the effects are felt far beyond its borders. Hashtag the communities and the firefighters behind the acreage figures, and the preparedness levels are the people. The communities that lie in the path of the fires and the firefighters, who place themselves between the flames and the homes in danger. In a season of this magnitude, the number of communities under threat is large, and for the people who live in them, the fire season is not an abstraction, but a personal ordeal of fear, uncertainty, and, for some, devastating loss. For those who live in and near the wildlands, the approach of a fire brings a particular kind of dread, a slow-building emergency that can stretch over days as a fire grows and moves, its direction shifting with the wind. Residents watch the smoke on the horizon, monitor the reports, and wait for the guidance that will tell them whether they can stay or must go. The system of warnings moves through stages, from an early alert to be ready, to a warning to prepare to leave, to the final order to evacuate now, and living through those stages is an exercise in sustained anxiety. When the order to evacuate comes, it brings its own trauma, the wrenching experience of leaving one's home, perhaps with only minutes to gather what matters most, not knowing whether there will be anything to return to. For some, the evacuation is a temporary disruption, and they return in days to find their homes intact. For others, the return brings the worst news imaginable, the sight of a home reduced to ash, a lifetime of possessions and memories gone in a matter of hours. At the heart of the response are the firefighters, the men and women who do some of the hardest and most dangerous work of any profession. Wildland firefighting is a physically brutal endeavor, demanding extraordinary strength and stamina. The crews often work far from roads and support, hiking into rugged terrain carrying heavy equipment, digging fire lines by hand, cutting away vegetation to deprive the fire of fuel, laboring for long hours in extreme heat and thick smoke. And they do it in an environment of constant danger, where the wind can shift and the fire can turn, and a situation can become deadly in moments. The hazards extend beyond the flames to the falling trees weakened by fire, the rolling rocks, the treacherous ground, the exhaustion and heat that can impair judgment. These are people who knowingly place themselves in harm's way to protect others, and their courage is the foundation on which the entire firefighting effort rests. Behind every crew on the fire line stands a vast support system, the camps that feed and shelter the firefighters, the supply chains that provide their equipment, the aircraft and their crews, the incident management teams that plan and coordinate the response. A major fire response is a massive undertaking, comparable to a military campaign in its complexity, involving thousands of people in a wide range of roles. The toll on the communities and the firefighters alike, the fear and the loss and the exhaustion, is one of the most painful and human dimensions of a severe fire season. Hashtag why the fires keep growing larger. Having examined this season in its many dimensions, we must confront the larger question that hangs over it, the question of why fire seasons like this one seem to be growing more severe, why the acreage figures keep climbing, and why the scale of the burning has reached levels that would once have been considered extraordinary. This is a question with several intertwined answers. One major factor is the changing climate, the warming that is reshaping conditions across the West and creating an environment more conducive to large and intense fires. As the climate warms, the region experiences hotter temperatures, which dry out the vegetation and extend the length of the fire season. The warming can contribute to more severe and prolonged droughts, leaving the landscape parched and primed to burn, and can cause the mountain snowpack to melt earlier, lengthening the dry season during which fires can spread. The cumulative effect is a landscape that is drier for longer, more flammable, and more prone to the kind of extreme fire behavior that drives the largest blazes. The warming does not start the fires, but it creates the conditions in which fires, once started, can grow far larger and burn far more intensely than they might have in a cooler world. A second major factor is the accumulation of fuel across the landscape, the buildup of vegetation and dead wood that has occurred in many forests and wildlands over a long period. For much of the past century, the dominant approach to wildfire was to suppress it aggressively, to put out fires as quickly as possible wherever they occurred. This approach, though well-intentioned and often necessary to protect lives and property, had an unintended consequence in many fire-adapted ecosystems, because it interrupted the natural cycle of frequent, low-intensity fire that had historically kept the fuel loads in check. Over time, the fuels accumulated, the forests grew denser, and the landscape built up a heavy load of burnable material. Now, when fires do occur, under severe conditions, they have far more fuel to consume, allowing them to burn with greater intensity and to spread more explosively. A third factor is the expansion of human development into fire-prone landscapes, the growth of communities in the zone where the wildlands meet the areas where people live. As more people build homes in and near the forests, more lives and property are placed in the path of potential fires, which raises the stakes of every season and increases the demands on the firefighting system. This expansion also means more potential sources of ignition, as human activity is a common cause of wildfires. These factors do not operate in isolation, but combine and reinforce one another, together producing the era of larger and more severe fires that we now appear to be entering, and that makes seasons like this one less an aberration than a sign of a changing reality. Hashtag, living in an age of fire we come, finally, to the largest meaning of this extraordinary season. A season of 1.6 million acres, of 85 simultaneous fires, of a firefighting system pushed to Preparedness Level 5, is not merely a bad year to be endured and forgotten. It is a marker of a changing reality, a sign that we may be entering an age in which fire on this scale is becoming a recurring feature of life in the West. For generations, severe fire seasons were understood as exceptional events, the rare catastrophic years that stood out against a backdrop of more ordinary conditions. But the pattern of recent years suggests that the exceptional is becoming the routine, that the conditions producing these massive fire seasons are aligning more often, and that the scale of the burning is trending upward. This is the difficult truth that a season like this one forces us to confront, that we may be living through a fundamental shift in the fire regime of the West, a transition to an era in which the fires burn bigger, more often, and more intensely than the ones our systems and our communities were built to handle. Adapting to this new reality, rather than treating each severe season as a one-time emergency, is the task that lies before us. Living in an age of fire means rethinking many things, from how and where we build our communities, to how we manage the vast landscapes of forest and wildland, to how we prepare and equip the systems that respond to the fires. It means recognizing that we cannot simply suppress our way out of the problem, that the accumulated fuels and the changing climate have created conditions in which fire will happen, and that our goal must be to live with fire more wisely rather than to eliminate it entirely. It means investing in the management of the landscape and the reduction of hazardous fuels, in the restoration of healthier forest conditions, and in the careful use of fire itself as a tool to reduce the risk of catastrophic blazes. And it means preparing our communities, hardening our homes, creating defensible spaces, and building the readiness and resilience that will allow people to survive and recover when the fires come. And so the season that has brought 1.6 million acres of burning, 85 simultaneous fires, and a firefighting system stretched to its absolute limit is, in the end, both a lesson and a warning. It reveals the immense power of wildfire in an age of accumulated fuel and warming climate, the strain it places on the systems built to respond, and the toll it takes on communities and firefighters alike. But it also points toward the response that is demanded of us, the adaptation and the preparation and the wiser relationship with fire that the new reality requires. Oregon's fires this summer are a stark chapter in an unfolding story, one that will continue to be written in the summers to come. And the choices we make in response will determine how that story ends. The fires are a challenge on a scale we have rarely faced, but they are also a call to understand, to prepare, and to build a future in which we can live alongside the fire that has become an inescapable part of our world.